What's up guys, Ian Sandusky from Let's Machine back here again for Practical Machinist. Today on Shop Talk we're going to be talking about quoting. But before we do that, make sure you like and subscribe below if you want to see more videos. Let's get into it. Okay guys, so this is one that I've had requested a few times and I feel like it's probably time to touch on it because we've been talking about so many business related things here on Shop Talk. You know, how to find work. The next thing that happens after you find that work is hopefully you get the opportunity to quote. So we're gonna go through my basic quoting process for some of you guys who are maybe either looking to take on new work as a new business, or some of you guys who are trying to learn that business end of things to start your own shops, or maybe you're even quoting out side jobs. Either way, we're gonna go through quoting step by step, the way I do it, to hopefully give you guys a little bit of help on doing that, okay? So the first thing that happens is you get an RFQ, a request for quote. This is a great moment because it's always a little bit exciting. You don't know what might be coming in that email or on that phone call. All you know is you have an opportunity to look at someone's work. And first off, congratulations. It's a big step when you first start getting RFQs coming in the door. So it's a very nice feeling. Even if you are someone who deals with this stuff all day like I do, it's always a good feeling to have RFQs coming in the door. It's an opportunity to get work on your floor, so you know there's no downside. The only real downside right off the bat with quoting is if you get yourself in a situation with companies who like to get a lot of work quoted and don't like to actually use you for that work. Unfortunately guys, there are companies out there that are maybe a little less savory that will occasionally use you to price out jobs that they are going to do. So, you know, they're a machining company who has this job coming in, they don't know how to quote it, so they'll bounce numbers off you or get you to come up with numbers to give them to use for their own quotes. This really isn't that common. You know, it's something to watch out for if it's happening repeatedly, but don't go into things assuming that this is a situation. The only time that this kind of thing has really happened to me is where I got on somebody's quoting list and I quoted out part after part after part with very little feedback and no orders. And eventually I do stop responding to those requests for quote. But again guys, that's kind of a situation that you'll cover when you get there. It's important when you walk into a quote for the first time that you're approaching it as an opportunity. Don't get too skeptical right off the bat because you will lose the work before you even get it. So the first step when it comes to quoting is identifying whether the job is for you or not. You take a look at the drawings, you take a look at the quantities, you take a look at the timelines, and right off the bat, you need to determine whether this is a job that makes sense for you to do. If you are a CNC milling shop and this is a turning job, right off the bat, guys, this job is probably not for you. If this job is in some kind of exotic material that you don't know or don't like to use or you don't do well on, identifying pretty quickly that this job just isn't suited for you is okay. Always take the time to make sure that it's really not for you because guys, the second you start turning quotes away, they're gonna stop asking you for more quotes, even if you know they have something down the road that is relevant to what you're doing. So really make sure that the job is for you, but give it the consideration before you decline to quote. So as soon as you've decided that the job does make sense for your shop to do, the next thing to look at is material availability and costing. Now, it may seem easy guys sometimes, and I've made this mistake before, where you look at a job and you say, okay, they want 3" by 3/4" 304 stainless for this job. And you go, yep, no problem. I know the cost per weight for that is X, so blah, blah, blah. And I go along and I quote it. Make sure that the material you want to use in that size actually exists. You'd be surprised how many things are actually special order, like 3/4 by 1, 304 stainless. Took me a while to figure out that for some reason is a rare size of material. So making sure that you actually go through and make sure that kind of material exists in the format you want it before you move on is important. Another thing, like, you know guys, companies don't always know what they're asking for. They may ask for 304 stainless 2 in a certain dimension and act like it exists. They may not know, they may just not know any better. So making sure that what they're asking for actually exists before you waste too much time getting into the next steps of this process is important. Also making sure that your suppliers have stock on the shelf or can get it quickly. I think we've all, guys who do this, have been in a situation where you go, oh yeah, you know, 1" diameter, XYZ, I can get that pretty easy. You don't even bother calling, and then you get the job, it's a 2-week timeline, you call your supplier, and all of a sudden, no, that stuff's not gonna be in for 3 weeks. So going through and making sure that material exists, is available, and in the size you want before you move on is important. The next step is features and feasibility. And this is kind of going back to that last point I just made, where sometimes people don't know what they're asking for. I know it's a bit of an in-joke at this point with some of you guys have been machinists and on the floor for quite a while, but people do not always know what they're asking for when they send you drawings. Someone who's looking to get a part made may not understand that cutters have radiuses. They may have square corners at the bottoms of pockets where they don't need to be. They may have dovetails at an angle that doesn't make sense. And it's not a negligence thing, and it's not a, people aren't smart. People just don't always know what they're asking for, and they don't know what they need. So going through and looking at the part to make sure that it is a feasible part to make, there's no huge internal cavities that you just cannot buy a boring bar long enough to do at a tolerance that makes sense. There's no compound threads where they want 1/2-inch threads, 3/8 threads, 1/2-inch threads, but they also want a bolt to go on it somehow. You'd be surprised at things you can see on drawings. So going through that drawing and making sure that A, it's feasible, and B, there's no features that aren't really necessary in your opinion, because you can always call and ask, guys. No one is ever gonna be mad at you for calling and asking, hey, listen, I see that there's a weird angle on this here. Does that need to be there, or can I bump that out to a standard 45? They'll either say, yes, do you know what? It is important that it's a 62.5 degree angle, or they'll say, no, do you know what? 45 is fine. And if they get mad about that, they may not be someone you want to work with anyway, okay? But going through and trying to help your customer out to make sure you can make that part at a price that makes sense with features and feasibility is kind of the next step in that process. After that is going through to figure out your machining process. So this generally, I write a bullet point machining plan. So if I'm making this part right here, it is a little aluminum widget. I want to go through and say, okay, so my material's coming in at this size. We'll probably do 1 mil off. I have tooling that'll do that. Then I'm gonna have to flip it unless I do it on 4th axis, put these holes in, etc., etc. You basically make a short form machining plan that makes sense to you. Now, plans, always get changed when they hit the floor, but at least having a good stance from where to start from will help you price that job out. And once you've got that, you want to go and look at your tooling. Again, guys, I like to say, I've said a few times here, you don't know how many times you've gone and said something will be easy. You put it on the floor and say, I don't have a cutter that can reach 3 inches, or I don't have a boring bar long enough. Eventually, you do learn to check these things before you take the work on and scramble to go get that tooling. But you will save yourself a headache by going through and making sure that you have tooling that makes sense for it. And if you have to make fixturing for it, making sure you account for that. If you're doing a 1,000 part run of something and the fixture takes an hour to make, it's something you need to think about, but it's not a big consideration. But if you're making something that is 3 parts and you need to make 4 fixtures or 4 sets of jaws to hold it, that is a big consideration for that job. So making sure you're always thinking that you have the tooling and how much time the fixturing and work holding is going to take to make or set up for that is kind of the next step in that process. The next step is timing. Some jobs, guys will come to you and say, listen, I have a 6-week lead time on these. It's for 3 parts, and you can say, no problem, we can get that done. Other jobs will come in and say, hey, someone else screwed this up. I told my customer it would be here last week. I need you to turn this around for me yesterday. Those jobs exist, they exist all the time. Making sure you consider your timing on that job is important. You should, if you are someone who is quoting, have access to or be creating the work schedule for the floor. So you can go and look very easily and say, yeah, do you know what? I don't have time this week for this job, but I can give you a reasonable expectation of X number of weeks. And if they want to bump that up and say, yeah, do you know what? We can't afford to wait that long. You can say, you know what? We have a standard expedition fee that basically covers you to pull out a job that's running that you may have more time on to put something in. That's something that you can do, guys. Like, it's not the best practice all the time to keep pulling jobs off and on, but there is profit to be made in jobs that need to be done now, and sometimes they are worth, when you add in those extra costs, pulling a job off something to put something else in. So making sure you consider whether you have the time and how much time that customer needs is kind of the next step in that process. The last kind of thing to think about when you're quoting a job directly is the other considerations. So scrap, does this job produce hazardous waste? You know, if you've ever worked with titanium, those chips can set on fire. You need to know what kind of things those jobs are going to affect your shop, such as if you're milling G10, do you have proper ventilation for that? If you're doing a fiberglass product, are you gonna have to shut other guys out of your floor while that runs? If it's a job with super tight tolerances, do you need to make sure that your other machines aren't running while that runs to make sure you get it perfectly flat? All little things you need to think about before you send out that quote, because once that quote goes out, then you are more or less committed to it. And guys, I know if things change, you can always go back and change things and say, yeah, do you know what? We were a little bit off on this, but in my opinion, when that quote goes out, that is your last opportunity to adjust your pricing without creating headaches. When you give them a price, they're building that price into what they're gonna bill out to their customer, or what they're selling that part for, or their final cost for that job. So the second you go and say, hey, do you know what? I didn't think of this. I need to make a fixture that's gonna cost another $1,000. They may say, well, we don't have time for this. I gotta go find someone else to do this now, and boom, that relationship is dead. So that's kind of the steps of things I go through when I'm quoting out a job, and hopefully at the end you have a number that you are comfortable with, a timeline you are comfortable with, that you can send out to a customer and feel comfortable with, okay? In the comments below, guys, I don't want to spend too much time on going through some of the other considerations. You know, when it comes to quoting, guys, there are a million different things that go into it, and it is a skill that you learn the same way as, you know, machining or anything else. But that's a very basic, you know, list of things to look for when you're quoting. But in the comments below, I would like to know some of your considerations and things that have happened to you when you were quoting that you can help other people out with. So if you had an experience that taught you a lesson, share it in the comments below, guys, because all this information is very helpful, okay? Thank you very much for watching, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe if you want to see more videos. And as always, have a great day. You take care.